Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ResponsAble Parenting. I'm your host, Becky Jennings, and today I have a guest. I would love to introduce you to Tanisha. Tanisha and I actually met through a mastermind, which is really exciting and fun. Just to know that there are other like-minded people out there, I think is so reassuring. And we connected, and I'm really excited to have you guys meet her and hear about her. So Tanisha is a homeschooling mom to identical 8-year-old twins. Woof.
Oh, right.
God bless your sweet, sweet soul. She's an earth-loving mom and woman behind the curtain of the Rooted Experience, which is a safe place to dive into transformational experiences such as one-on-one coaching, workshops, courses, and retreats. Her work is largely based on healing unconscious patterns, thoughts, beliefs, nervous system regulation, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and living your best life and parenting life from a place of intention. She's also recently launched a new venture, a product line called Wild and Rooted, where she creates earth-based wellness tools for busy moms looking to carve out slivers of sacredness in everyday moments. Welcome, Tanisha. Thank
Oh
you
my,
for being here.
thank you, Becky. That was like the most beautiful little intro there. I love that. Thank you so much.
Well, I am excited to dive in because I think nervous system regulation is like a new-ish topic. I
Mm-hmm.
think people are, we're aware of like words like workaholism, and we're aware of like
Mm-hmm.
words like burnout. But
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? How
Mm-hmm.
does that relate to our nervous system? And like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like this is now the conversation that we're having of like, oh, this is
Yeah,
actually not just like a random idea. This is a part of our body that
right.
really does kind of rule the house.
It really does, right?
Yeah.
You'd think we would know more about it because of how important it is, but
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
So it's kind of a new territory, and I'd love to dive in. We're going to talk about how we got into nervous system regulation,
Mm-hmm.
awareness, and practice, and really how that impacts our parenting. So
Yeah.
thank you for being here. So tell me, how did you find nervous system work?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to be introduced to your community and meet all the lovely people here and to connect more deeply with you. So I'm really excited to be here. That's such a good question because I feel like when it comes to the body, I have had this love affair with it for so long. It started in my early 20s when I did yoga teacher training, right? Like that was like the hot thing. Everybody does yoga teacher training. I went to massage therapy school, and then I joined this meditation school that I studied with for over 10 years, where we really studied, I guess, how consciousness lands in our body and the triggers, right? That were like how we get triggered and activated by things.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, there's some real grit to this and how it actually impacts our life. But I will be honest, I think the truth of my nervous system specific work came after I had kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because before I had kids, I was living in San Francisco with my husband. I was a freelance, like doing freelance work. I had an open schedule. Like it was just amazing. We would go
Remember
out to
that? Remember an open schedule?
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. No one asking me a million questions or for a snack like every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, and then I had this really naive idea that babies just sleep a lot. I was like, oh, this is going to be really easy. Like I can
Yes.
work and babies are going to sleep all the time. And that's just so not what happened. And I realized really quickly that they were impacting my nervous system. And I remember telling my husband on multiple occasions, I was like, something's not right in my body. Like I feel like I'm being hijacked. I
Yes.
feel like I'm out of control when it comes to my responses to things. Like I can't even stop myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying things to my kids and acting in a way that I was stunned. I was like, where is this coming from? This isn't, the quote unquote kind of parent I
Yes.
always thought I would be.
Totally.
And I dove in because I was like, okay, I don't want what I'm feeling to pour into their cup. I want to, balance or heal my body so that I can be more present with them,
Yeah.
and create that container for them. So that's where it really started because Parenthood is freaking hard.
It's, I know. Yeah, I always joke that like, well, years before we even got pregnant, one of my best friends and I, we wrote a list out of like why to never get pregnant, right? We were like, it was like a 50
Yeah.
and we would just like randomly shoot each other like another one to add to the list. And it was like, it's a really funny list
Hilarious.
looking back at it.
Yeah.
But like what nobody tells you is that you are going to be a person who is
Mhm.
raising individuals who have totally different personalities,
Yeah.
that you have to somehow teach emotional regulation and situational appropriateness
Yes.
while you're super activated from things that they've triggered from your
Yes.
past or whatever. And you're just sitting here going, wait, wait, wait. No one
Yes.
ever said this.
No.
No one ever said it. And I
No.
would piggyback with you. I discovered nervous system regulation work after the death of my son because I really was just everything was so hyperactive. And my
Yeah.
situation, I had a full-term stillbirth, everything was like it was like the most perfect pregnancy I'd ever had. So
Mm,
I didn't
mm,
have a lot of like, you know, there was no issues. There were no complications. It wasn't high risk in any way, shape, or form. But I did
wow.
start getting like intuitive nervous system hits of like
Mm,
things are like I started getting a lot of red flags at the
mhm.
end. And I just didn't really understand how to listen to them. And I didn't
Yeah.
understand what the messages, because when I went to the doctor, everything was fine, everything on paper, all the blood work,
Mm,
everything was fine. But in my body, I was getting sent all these signals of like
wow.
danger, right? And
Wow.
I just
Yeah.
never recognized what they were. And then
Yeah.
afterwards, looking back, I'm like, oh my God, that was my body telling me so many signals.
Yeah.
But then parenting a
Oh,
living child afterwards,
no.
everything felt like a threat or danger.
Yep.
And then I was very confused on like, I don't know what to listen to and what to not because, it was
Yes.
so challenging. I was like, that's actually
Yes.
just discomfort. It's not a real threat or danger, even though I feel like my body's on fire and
Yes.
I don't know how to handle it. So I
Yep.
really had to dive into nervous system understanding and practices because I was like so reactive to everything. Like
Yeah.
the smallest things that were like totally normal
Yep.
human childhood stuff, I just couldn't even handle. So
Yes.
learning nervous system practices has been like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, I can start to recognize my patterns. I can start to recognize this. And like, I
Yeah.
actually have a tool now.
Yeah.
And
That's the
that's
biggest part right there, right?
totally, totally,
Yes. I
totally,
remember saying to a friend of mine, I was like, as parents, our capacity to parent is determined by the capacity of our nervous system,
absolutely,
right? Like, if
absolutely.
we have this narrow nervous system, everything's going to feel like a threat. Or if we're super activated or super under resourced and like in a deactivated state, everything's going to feel like too much.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh
Yes.
my gosh, that must have been so hard.
Yeah, and I still find it's like he's been gone for 5 years and I still feel that activation on a regular basis. I have to
Yeah.
be so mindful all the time.
Yeah.
Like for instance, just yesterday, we had a unexpected intruder on my son's school.
No.
And while the person was not armed and while it was a whole like it escalated quickly in
Yeah.
terms of the messages being sent all around and all of that,
Yeah.
but my nervous system
Mhm.
kicked in such
Yeah.
a way that I was just beside myself, and
Hmm.
everyone was safe and it wasn't a full thing, but
Yep.
I'm still recovering today from what
Absolutely.
happened 24 hours ago. And I,
100%.
like I'm wrapped in a cozy sweatshirt with a cozy blanket, like giving
Yeah.
myself like warm tea because I'm like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, I'm still hyperactive. And
Yes.
I've had to really learn that from all of this, and probably before, I'm a highly sensitive person and I hold
Yep.
on to things for a lot longer than the average person usually is
Yep.
like, aren't we moving on now? I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
still in
Yeah.
tears over
Yeah.
here.
100% relate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about parents who might have never heard of nervous system, might
Hmm.
not have ever thought that there's a tool around nervous system activation. Like, let's
Hmm.
break it down granularly. Like, your
Hmm.
nervous system is your threat detection system. I like to say it's like an
Hmm.
alarm bell in your body of letting you
Yeah.
know that there's a threat or danger or discomfort.
Yep.
How can we start to begin to read these cues and
Hmm.
understand and differentiate between like actual danger and like
Mm.
maybe a storyline, maybe a negative coping skill, something like that?
Yep. Oh, I love that question. Well, the really cool thing is that your nervous system, I always love this little fun fact. Your nervous system is as unique as your fingerprint. Always blows my
Love
mind,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Because your nervous system is literally shaped by how you were brought up. So this is again why it's so important as parents, right? Because as little kids, our nervous system is modeled after our caregivers.
Mm.
And I work specifically with the vagus nerve, which is one of the largest branches of the nervous system. It goes down through the spinal cord, it wraps around your ears. It's part of all of the natural autonomic nervous system. So your breathing, your heart rate, then it goes down around your belly. So it's informed by your gut health. Um, and they're learning that it's really a bottom up system. So instead of your brain saying, oh, I'm stressed, and then feeding that to your body actually feels these sensations, moves them up to your brain, and then your brain interprets them as whatever the signals might be.
Yeah.
And it's super wired for habit, right? Like you've seen, it loves repetition and it loves noticing patterns even when they don't exist.
Yes.
So
Yes.
like you were sharing so beautifully that response you got when you tragically lost your son, it then repeats those same symptoms when other
Totally.
things happen that don't necessarily relate to the same level
Yeah.
of reaction. So our nervous systems, they are this really amazing tool for detecting danger, but they're also what I think is so amazing, the pathway for a lot of really beautiful sensations. So when we're in an activated state, we associate that with things like anxiety, anger, things that are more on the fight or flight register.
Mhm.
But when we pair that with more intention and consciousness, that's when we get pleasure. That's when we get excitement and joy and fun.
Yep.
That's a part of our activated nervous system.
Yeah, that's still very heightened.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
right?
almost like all hands are on deck in both areas,
Yes,
but in totally
yes.
different, like approved and disapproved ways.
Yes. And then we can also go into a more, it's called the dorsal state of the nervous system. And that's when we go into dissociation, depression, numbness. We feel really tired. But that also comes up in meditation or Shavasana pose, right? So our
Yeah.
nervous system is so wise and it really does carry the whole gamut of how we experience the world through sensation.
So interesting because I think we, in the zeitgeist of how we're talking about nervous system now, it's all the reaction, it's the aggression,
Yes.
it's the height, all the negative aspects. And again,
Mhm.
this is what we do in the parenting space, right? We tend to focus on the negative things and try to get a
Yeah.
tool to fix,
Yes.
versus
Yes.
just being aware
Hmm.
of what our body is telling us. Because it's
Right.
not like we know what to do oftentimes. It's just we get so swept up in the
Yeah.
if we should be doing this, could we, should we, all of
Yes.
that, that we then lose sight of just the biological natural cues that were being sent.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the, like, how do we know the difference, right?
Mm,
It makes me think even about your story about the intruder on your son's school
yeah.
school. Like, there's this acronym for fear, false events appearing real.
Ooh,
And when I think about that reaction where you're like, you get thrown out of your window, right?
totally.
I talk about window of tolerance with the nervous system, where with when you're in your window, you're calm, you're balanced, you're present, you can make informed decisions. When you go above your window, that's when you're in the more activated, anxious, angry state. When you go below your window, that's when you're feeling more sleepy, lethargic, and dissociated. So when you go above your window, you're like, oh my gosh, intruder, what do I need to do? How do I keep my kids safe? Right. And that's like when you feel into that response versus maybe those more subtle cues that you got from your body when you were pregnant,
Hmm.
they feel so different.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah. And so that's always one of the ways that I start to tune into my nervous system is it likes to speak through exaggerated, really heightened ways of getting your attention where
Mm,
you literally feel like you're not in control of it. You feel like you've been hijacked.
when you say that, it just sends like, it just makes me think all of the time that maybe our nervous system has to be that loud
Yes.
because we are so busy with everything else that we've
Mm,
distracted ourselves in hundreds of other ways, that
right.
maybe our nervous system has to be that loud in
Mm,
order for us to actually start listening.
right. It's a really interesting idea, right? Because when you think about its purpose is to keep us safe,
Hmm?
but it's not very smart in a way, right? Like
Yes.
it's not the wisest part of us.
Mm-mm.
And that's where it starts to get a little confusing because then it's like, well, am I hearing this really loudly because it's really important? Or
Right.
am I hearing this really loudly because it's actually connected to something that happened to me 20 years ago and I haven't healed it? And so it's just playing on repeat.
Uh,
It's kind of like when you have a record player and it gets to the end of the record and it's like, like at the end, right? And it's
yes.
like, that's our nervous system. Like it's just repeating. It's like, whoop, whoop. We're just going
Yes.
to keep doing this game.
Yes. Yeah, I was speaking to a client about that earlier today of just being like the same thing that your daughter is doing right now is not what you were allowed to do as a child. And so when she's doing it, your instincts are the
Mhm.
learned coping strategies you adopted in childhood that kept you safe then. But when
Yes.
she's doing it right now, you're like, I know I'm the parent and I know I'm not unsafe, but right now I
Mm-hmm.
feel so unsafe. Why is
Yeah.
that? And
Yeah.
it's not like she's doing anything to harm the parent. The daughter
Right.
is literally just having the same visceral human emotion that she had when she was a kid. But
Right.
connecting the dots, like you're right, it's on this loop from 20 years ago
Yeah.
that still hasn't been healed, still hasn't been processed, a skill or a tool hasn't been matched to it to help it
Yep.
through. And
Yeah.
so we're sitting here in a total nervous system dysregulated state when our child is doing
Yes.
something that pushes on one of those wounds that's actually
Yes.
scratching that record again. Totally.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that in a little bit further, maybe go into it further. How is our nervous system
Mhm.
impacting our child's nervous system? We talk a lot about co-regulation, but do we even know what co-regulation is?
That's a really great question, right? Co-regulation. It's funny because I also feel like that was such a big buzz topic. And there's so many camps about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
kids should know how to self-soothe versus no, they can't. And so this is where the nervous system comes in, like literally in the same way your nervous system was shaped by your upbringing, your kids' nervous system is being shaped by theirs. And so they actually learn how to self-soothe by the ways that you soothe them.
Mm,
And so how you show up and co-regulate with them is going to inform their bodies about how to find that same sense of regulation as they get older. And the thing that I find really fascinating is that co-regulation with your kids has to happen all the way up until they're 25 years old. Like, and obviously it should happen beyond that, but they say like kids, it's not something they eventually just get by the time they're 10 or whatever. Like co-regulation is when somebody puts out a bid for support and they are received with validation, honoring, being seen, and supported in that bid for support.
mm,
And you can think about this even now as adults, we need co-regulation too, right? Like as parents, we reach out to our girlfriends or another parent and we're like, dude, this is freaking hard.
yeah.
And a co-regulation is, it is so hard. How are you? What's challenging? Tell me about it.
Yeah. What do you
Not
need?
what do you need? Not
Mhm.
co-regulation is, oh, it's not that hard. They'll grow out of this phase. You'll look back and you'll wish they were this age again. It's okay. Let's move on. Right? Not accepting that bid.
Yeah.
So co-regulation continues to happen. And when we co-regulate, we teach our kids how to soothe themselves. But let's be honest, we can't teach them how to regulate when we're dysregulated.
Totally.
And I found like a personal, like this is my like cross to bear is that I get really activated and I'm the kind of parent for better or worse, when I get really activated, I tend to seek the reason outside of myself. So I'll be
Mm,
like, I'm feeling activated, you need to be quiet. Or I'm feeling activated, you need to stop doing this thing you're doing.
yes.
And I tend to externalize my reason. versus saying, I'm activated. I need to go do some tools to calm myself because what you're doing is actually fine. Or maybe there's like a mixture of it, right? Like I need to regulate myself and we need to create some boundaries within the family space so we can all enjoy it together.
I
So,
think that is so vitally important to maybe say
mhm,
even again.
mhm.
We often, you are not alone in that camp. It is so easy to point to the other, to point to the external stimulus as the root cause.
Yes.
And while I should note, all of that is annoying, all of that
Yes.
is dysregulating, all of that is a lot for us to take on, and
Yep.
probably more stimulus than any generation of any time has ever experienced.
Mhm.
And at the same time, that puts the onus on the child to meet
Yes.
our needs
Yeah,
so
100%.
that so that we're okay.
Yep.
So that if our child is meeting our needs, we're okay. They don't have to feel the backlash of it. And that
Yes.
creates a whole nother cycle of our children having to constantly make sure everybody else is okay, putting
Yep.
their needs last. It
Yes.
takes the empowerment out of their whole journey
Their
and their whole process,
childhood.
their childhood.
Yes.
And so I
Yeah.
think one of the first steps in our parenting journey of learning this nervous system is like learning what is activating us.
Yes.
Like, what is it? Is it noise? Is it
Hmm.
two people talking at the same time? Is
Hmm.
it, those terrible toys, right? Is it
Hmm.
music happening, dog barking, needing, like
Yeah.
there's so many things, but like
So
starting to
many.
pinpoint what is the activation. Like for me, it's being
Yep.
interrupted. I will be like
Hmm.
through the roof faster than I was like, I'm having a good day. You interrupted me, and I'm like, I'm done. Like
Yeah.
I'm just like, it's immediate. It's almost instantaneous for me.
Wow.
So to
Yeah.
know that like interrupting is my thing where I have to be like,
Yep.
I have to like
Uh-huh.
stop myself in the moment
Yep.
and starting to really recognize what are those moments where I'm just like, I'm going, like I'm
Yeah.
already out of my window of tolerance. That
Yep.
has been really, or like if a kid accidentally hurts me, like
Yes,
if
I
I
have that
if
too.
I get headbutted, like 2 nights ago, my
Yes.
son was having a hard time going to sleep. He kept calling us in. It was well past bedtime. So I was already starting to notice I was getting really upset because
Hmm.
he was moving outside of the boundaries.
Hmm.
I was exhausted. So these are all things that are like checking the list of going, I'm
Yep.
exhausted. I'm
Yep.
feeling activated because he's not listening.
Yep.
I still have to do lunch boxes and dishes. I haven't actually eaten yet.
Oh
And there's
gosh.
all these steps that are like,
Yes.
and he calls us in one more time, and he doesn't call us in like nicely. He's like, "Mom,"
Yes.
which
Yes.
sends me already.
Yep.
And then I go to give him a hug to help him go to
Uh-huh.
sleep, and he headbutts me
Oh,
right in the lip. And
oh
I
my
was like,
gosh.
and your instinct is
Hmm.
so explosive. And
Totally.
and I was just like, it took everything in my body to not just like haul off because I was
Yes.
already so activated. And I got down off the ladder of the bunk bed. I
Yep.
held onto the door as hard as I can, and I was like, I did kind of a silent scream, and he was like, I'm sorry, you know.
Oh,
But it was one of those things where I was like, I'm not going to yell. I'm not
oh,
going to do
good.
all these things, but I
Wow.
have to get these feelings out of my body. And so I
Yeah.
kind of modeled being really activated, but not
Yeah.
harming another human.
Yeah.
Even at the same time, I was so angry. But it's like
Yeah.
recognizing how flooded we can get
Yeah.
so quickly. And then
Yeah.
also not going through the cycle of guilt and shame and
Oh,
all of that
huge.
we put on ourselves for not doing it perfectly, right?
Right.
I didn't model that perfectly. I didn't do
Yeah.
this perfectly. It's like, well, that's life too,
Yeah.
is knowing that you're going to have these moments of huge explosions. Okay,
Yeah.
how do we model coming back into nervous system regulation?
Yeah. And I just have to say, the way you shared how you handled that was amazing because I probably would have said something and then felt really bad about it.
Well,
And
I
I,
did say, I'm so angry right now,
yeah.
right? I said it
Yeah.
really loud, but then I held onto
Yeah.
the door and just kind of was like, am I going to
Yes.
kick the door? Am I going to scream at the door? Like,
Yes.
there were so many like jerky moments where I
Yeah.
was like, what am I going to do? How do I get this out of my body? But
Yes.
they recognized it, and then
Yeah.
they were like, I can see you're really mad. Like,
Oh,
I can see you're
sweet
really mad, and I'm
peas.
sorry. And that's something that we talk a lot about in our house of like
Yeah.
recognizing and putting words to it. I don't know if you do this in your house as
Yes.
well, but like if my kids are like, I hate you, I'm like, you know what? I don't think you hate me. I think what actually is happening is you're frustrated the game isn't going the way you want. Is there a
Yeah.
different way we can say this? Because I can feel you're activated, right? And
Yes.
we're
Yes.
starting to talk like that,
Yep.
where I'm starting to say, here's my activation point. This is what I can handle right now. This is what I
Yeah.
can't handle right now.
Yep.
Like yesterday, for instance, after the intrusion thing that happened at school, my son asked for iPad. He knows he's not allowed to have iPad, right?
Uh-huh.
He was like, well, I was just wondering if, and I said, Hunter, I love you so much. And at this moment, my body can't handle this conversation. Like,
Right.
I
Yes.
actually can't go into this conversation right now. I was
Yes.
like, I love you. We can table this right now. I'm
Yep.
not going to do it. And he
Yeah.
was like, can I just tell you? I was like, you can't.
No. Yes.
And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to squash you. I just
Yeah.
actually can't handle it right now. And so we're starting to talk like that in our family. What
Yes.
can we not handle right now?
Yes. Yes. And it's such a process. Like I think what you're showing is that there's this evolution where it's so hard to, right? Like I'm thinking about kids and their meltdowns. And when you don't have someone there to narrate for you, and you don't have someone there to name it for you, they don't know what they're feeling.
No,
They're just in meltdown, right? Like they don't have that internal dialogue of like, oh, I just really need a snack right now. I'm going into my hangry mode. Like
totally.
they don't know that. And
Totally.
so for those of us that didn't grow up with it either, we don't have it either.
Hmm.
Right. And so that's where, when we have this list of tools, like we have resources, we can start experimenting with them. So when we get activated, we're like, oh, I'm going to try this tool. And then when you kind of work through this activation, it's like, oh, that's why I got upset. It's like
Yes.
that hindsight of like, okay, what was happening? Like, we're going to sleuth this out a little bit. Okay,
Yes.
that's what was happening. And then you start to see the patterns.
Yes.
And then we can arrive at this place where you have these beautiful conversations with your kids. Like, okay, I can already feel that I'm getting activated here. Like my thing was waking up in the morning, and I used to wake up at the same time as my kids,
Hmm.
and it was awful because we're so close that they would like come and sit on me, and they're twins, right? So they want to sit on me at the same time, and they want to like tell me all their stories, and I would love it at first, but then I found out like, wow, I've been awake for a half hour and I am physically depleted. Like
Hmm.
I'm done and I just woke up.
Yeah.
And so then I established a boundary. I was like, I love you, but I won't play a game or engage in any kind of play until after breakfast. And
Yes.
so when they wake up, they're like, oh, you want to play a game? I'm like, I do after breakfast. And like
Hmm.
that was always my boundary. But it really took patience
Yeah.
of, having my tools so I could calm myself down
Yeah.
and then be more aware.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I wanted to share too is like, we talk a lot about this activated state, but for some of us, we also go into the retreat state, right? So
Yes.
for some parents listening, they might be like, oh, I'm not really a yeller, or I don't really get in those big mood swings. But for some, it might look like going numb. It
Mm.
might look like just leaving the room. It might look like your kid's having a meltdown on the floor and you just kind of stare at them and you're like, I know I should be doing something right now, but I have zero impulse to engage
Yes.
with them, right? Like that's also your nervous system. So
Totally.
it's not just these really big, expressive,
Yeah.
outward demonstrations. Sometimes
Yeah.
they can be retreating too.
Yeah, that's that freeze survival response
Yeah,
where it is
exactly.
actually a learned behavior
Yeah.
and it's coming out. It served you well in childhood. It's just not serving in parenthood. And
Mm-mm.
I find that that's like a huge thing to recognize is like, and that, like you said, it's just writing down and kind of doing the reverse engineering behind the scenes of like,
Mhm.
this is what activated me. This was
Yeah.
my response.
Hmm.
Like when has this come up in the past? Like
Right.
what other situations in my childhood or in my teenage years or 20s or 30s, when did I respond like this? Let's start like
Yeah.
linking those back to be
Right.
like, oh, that's where this is coming from.
Yeah.
And I think also part of this is just having compassion with
Mhm.
yourselves right now, because it's like we're kind of this interesting generation of people who we were raised by a very like needless society, like don't
Mm-hmm.
have needs because your needs
Mm-hmm.
kind of disrupt my homeostasis as the
Right,
parent. We
right.
were we were making sure that like, our parents were feeling great a lot of the time.
Yep.
And so we're reparenting and meeting needs that we've never really had needs in the
Yep.
midst of parenting. And it's a very
Yeah.
aggressive place to
Oh my
parent.
gosh.
And you're probably
Yes.
also dealing with aging parents at the same
Right.
time.
Yes. It's
So
so
it's,
funny. Yeah.
yeah, go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was just thinking there was a point after our twins were born where my husband and I decided to move from San Francisco back to our hometown because family was all here and we wanted more support and have the kids be a part of like family celebrations. So we moved back to our hometown, which is still in Northern California, but we moved in with my parents until we could find a place. And then the pandemic hit. And so we were like
Oh my
on
God.
lockdown in my parents' home with 2-year-old twins. And there were a lot of really beautiful moments. Like I loved the relationship that they formed with them, and they were an enormous help. And I found myself in this really weird place where I was in that relationship with my parents as their daughter while also carving myself out as a new mom
Mhm.
and noticing personal tendencies of how I would show up as said daughter while also trying to evolve as an independent woman as a mom. Like
Yes.
it was this crazy sandwich that was a mixture of beauty and challenge
Mhm.
that really shaped me as a person, but
Yes.
gave so much insight into all the things we're trying to unravel from our childhood so that we
Yep.
can show up in a different way as present parents.
Yes. I have a very specific memory. I went on vacation with my parents and my mother-in-law and with the boys, and it was a week. We were in a rental house. We were all trying, it was an outdoor concert. We were supposed to be outside the whole time. It got rained and hailed out most
Oh
of the
no.
time. So we were all kind of stuck inside this, and it was freezing. It was like 30 degrees. It was
Oh
just, we were
no.
not expecting any of that. And I started noticing just like my hyper awareness of like
Yes.
my parents' side eye or my parents' discomfort around totally normal play. There wasn't a TV, there was a radio, but there were no games. So my kids were coming up with games to keep themselves entertained inside. They were playing Flora's Lava. It was really,
Yes.
it was loud. But I
Yes.
started noticing their reactions, which started tipping off
Yeah.
my nervous system. And then
Yes.
I started saying, like, is my and this is all unconscious, but I was trying to stay connected to my parents and be like,
Yes.
see, I'm still a good kid. I'm still a good kid. I'm still a
Yes.
good kid, even though I'm like, but wait, is my good kid status on like blast because my kids aren't being quote unquote good because they're being loud? It
Right.
was the wildest,
Yes.
perfect nervous system storm for me.
Yes. Right?
So I can't imagine being in lockdown. That would have been a whole thing.
Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about awareness of our nervous system.
Mhm.
What is one of your favorite nervous system tools, like practices that you
Hmm.
do maybe daily, maybe moment to moment?
Yeah.
And I'll share mine as well.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm a big, big fan of breath. I'm a big fan of breath. I personally, because I tend to get activated, I love the 1 to 2 breath where you breathe in for 4 counts and then you breathe out for 6 counts.
Mhm.
That helps sink you into that more rest and digest space and it activates the parasympathetic. And that really helps me. When I'm feeling angry, I love the shaking, like something that actually like moves the energy out.
Yes.
And if I'm really feeling it, but I'm not in a space where I can leave my kids, or maybe I'm not fully in that place where I need to, I'll even turn it into something they can join me in where we'll like dance or
Mhm.
do the shimmy, like try to just get the energy moving.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
I don't get too dissociated, but I do have like depression sometimes based on like after an activation,
Mhm.
where I'll sometimes go into that shame spiral. And for me, again, it's just breathing. I'll go to a quiet space. Um, those are probably the ones I do the most often personally.
Yes.
Yeah. What about
I
you?
Yeah, so I started noticing that I had to like put a meditative practice into my day almost daily in order to
Yeah.
like just be like baseline chill.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
I'm just saying like to get me to neutral.
Yes.
And I started noticing that maybe based off my trauma, maybe based off whatever, my pelvis holds most of my
Mm,
tension and stress. And
yeah.
so I'll throw on like a 15-20 minute guided meditation and I'll do hip activated, like opening stretches
Love it.
for like 20 minutes in the morning because
That's amazing.
I'm just not chill if I don't,
Yes.
like, I am absolutely
Yes.
not.
Yep.
And I find myself super reactive if I
Yep.
don't give myself that
Yes.
in the moment. I do a lot of like hand
Gotcha.
clenching,
Yep.
to just kind of like feel the sensation like in my body and like let the anger go to my hands. I do a lot of
Yeah.
hand clenching with a
Yeah.
lot of the inhale.
Mm-hmm.
I try to do 4 and 8. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to do those really long exhales, like
Mm-hmm.
really intentionally, like out the mouth, not just out the
Yep.
nose, like really
Yep.
aggressive that.
Yeah.
Um, and then sometimes if my kids are like super out of their minds, I'll
Yeah.
like sit down on the ground and I'll put a blanket over my head
Oh
to
my
like
God.
really like close it all
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And it'll almost like stop them in their tracks. They're like, what is
What
she
is she?
doing?
Yeah.
And then they'll kind of come in and then they'll start like breathing with me. I'm like, I'm
Oh,
breathing,
I love
I'm
it.
focusing. And then dancing. Dancing for
Yes.
sure is one
Yep.
of my ways to like shake it out hardcore.
Yep. Yep.
And we'll throw on a music. I love the bilateral stimulation
So good.
in music where it's just, and my
Mm-hmm.
son loves it. So I went to like
Yeah.
some old school 90s, early 2000s songs that I love that
Yep.
added bilateral stimulation tracks to
That's
it.
cool.
And so we'll like listen to that and
Yep.
dance because it's just so helpful.
So
Um,
good.
yeah, the other thing is like running my hands under really cold water
That's a good one
gets me
too.
like back into my body to be like, I can
Yeah.
feel, and just saying things out loud. Like I feel my fists clenching. I feel
Yep.
the water. It helps me like
Yeah.
just get in there.
Yeah. You know, I love what you said about that because it really highlights that it doesn't have to be a quote unquote tool, right? Like, oh, I'm going to
Hmm.
go do this breathing exercise. Like,
Yeah.
or it can be so woven into your lifestyle. Like me
Oh
waking
yeah,
up in the morning, like
totally.
I don't do games before breakfast,
Yeah.
or I get up 2 hours before my kids so I can work out and I can have some time to myself
Yeah.
to get some work done. Like
Yeah.
I know I need that. Otherwise, I'm on edge all day. Right?
Totally. I mean, you can even say, I have to go to the bathroom real fast and run your hands under cold water, where
Yes.
it's not like, because of you, I'm doing
Yeah.
this. It's like, I gotta go to potty. I gotta go to the potty,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And then,
Exactly.
and I think what you just highlighted so clearly is like, you've recognized the needs within your body in order to satiate enough to
Hmm.
stay slightly not unhinged, right?
Right.
Like
Right. It's
this is, we're not saying, and this
yeah.
is I think the beauty of it, and this is where our perfectionist mentality and all of this kind of can click in, where it's like
Yeah.
I have to nail these tools perfectly in order to give my
Mm-mm.
child a secure attachment so that they don't end up with
Right.
negative coping strategies. Like whoa, whoa,
Oh my
whoa,
gosh, the pressure.
it's a lot of
It's
pressure.
a lot of pressure.
And so if we're just like, no, this is keeping us at our base. Like this is
Yes.
nourishing us, because if we don't nourish ourselves, we are
Yeah.
going to look to our children to satisfy those needs within
a
us.
hundred percent. And
So
it's so
we
not their
need to,
job.
it's not their job. It's
No.
our job to be like, I need rest and solace 15 minutes a day. Where can I
Yes.
find that?
Yes.
I need to breathe and focus on my breath for
Yes.
1 minute a day.
Oh, I'm so excited by what you're sharing because the other thing it makes me remember, like, think about is that within working with the nervous system, there's the 3 R's: resiliency, relaxation, and resourcefulness.
Mm.
And did I say relaxation? It's regulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Either way.
Resilience, regulation, and resources. And the thing that always strikes me is that within resources, I feel like a lot of times as moms or parents for the dads out there, there's this part of us that feels like we have to just work through it on our own. Like, oh, if I'm having a hard time with my kids, I just need to learn these tools that I can do myself so that I can show up better. But
Mm.
one of the resources that we need to take more advantage of is in the environment, right? Like
Yes.
who can I ask for support here? Who can
Yes.
I like have watch the kids for a little bit? And I know not all of us have the option of necessarily having other people watch our kids in all when we need
Yeah.
it, but maybe it's taking them to the park so that you can have 20 minutes while they play to have some
Yeah.
quiet time. So it's, recognizing that it's not all on you to try to learn these tools and do it all by yourself, but having the beautiful community that you have, right? Like going into a community like what you offer,
Yeah.
having other moms and other parents around to bounce ideas off of or see that you're not alone. Like
Yeah.
that is a huge asset.
Yeah, I always say like cycle breaking doesn't need to be a solo mission where we like white
No,
knuckle our way through this. Like
exactly.
there can be a lot of spaciousness, there can be a lot of support. And like you said, a tool doesn't have to be a 90-minute Bikram yoga class. It
No.
can be a 30-second, just okay, I'm aware of
Mhm.
XYZ. I'm just gonna go sit in my closet with the door closed,
Yes.
and I'm just gonna like sniff essential oil. Like it's like it can
Totally.
be that simple where
Yes,
you're just like, this
exactly.
is what I'm gonna do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you teach your kids nervous system regulation? And if so, is it subtle? Is it a practice? Like, how do
Uh-huh.
you weave it in for your kids?
Yeah, I do weave it in with my kids.
Yeah.
I think it's integral. Like it's such an important pillar, I think, for them to have that self-awareness. One of the parts of nervous system work is called interoception. And interoception is the ability, I have that exact same water bottle. Sorry. Like exact color, everything.
I love it.
So interoception is the ability to have awareness of your internal landscape. Exteroception, what's going on outside. So interoception is not something we're always taught, right?
No, no,
And
no.
it really ties to a nervous system tool called Name It to Tame It.
I talk
And
about that all the time. If we
right?
don't have a name to it, it has all the power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also activates something I love. I call it the sacred witness, right? When we name something, we are no longer it. We are the one naming it. So it creates an automatic separation from the thing we're feeling. And
Oh,
we
I love
become the
that.
witness of it, which helps us. Like one of my favorite aspects of doing this work is when we can do what I call depersonalize our responses. And when we can create a separation, when we can become the witness to what's going on in
Mhm.
our body, it becomes something we can depersonalize because we're no
Yes.
longer self-identifying as the thing.
This is huge because
Yeah.
ultimately what we're trying to do as parents, as this community of, I try to, I don't say gentle or conscious. I'm like, this is a responsive parenting
Yes.
space.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
we're experiencing the external stimulus. We're
Yes.
trying to give more space
Mm-hmm.
between the experience and our response. And
Yes.
when we can, like exactly what you're saying, it's taking it out, it's stepping back, it's witnessing versus absorbing,
Yeah.
it's not giving into it, it's just noticing it,
Mm-hmm.
giving ourselves enough time to access our choice in our
Mm-hmm.
yes, in our no, in our response. It's
Mm-hmm.
all of that, and it's
Yep.
all tied to our nervous system.
Yes.
It's wild. It is wild.
Yeah, so I try to give that to our kids as much as I possibly can, naming their emotions, and then I invite them to tell me about what it feels like in their body.
Mm.
One of my kids has like he gets explosive too. Like I wonder where he learned it from. And so I try to tell him like, okay, what does it feel like in your body? And they don't always know. So I'll give them some tool. I'm like, does it feel hot? Does it feel cold? Does it feel spiky? Does it feel soft? Oh, it feels hot. Okay, cool. If there was a color, is there a color in there? He's like, yeah, it's hot and it's red. I'm like, okay, great. Where does it feel red? In
Mhm.
my chest. Okay, does it feel in your arms too? No, just my chest. Okay, if your arms aren't red, what color are they? Oh,
Mm.
they're like an aqua color. Cool. Can you see that point where the red and the aqua start to meet? Yeah, I can. Right. And now he's not an active anymore.
Not at
He's just
all.
being super inquisitive about his body.
That's
So
incredible.
we talk about it a lot like that. Another part that I love, especially in the activated state, is that it literally accesses your reptilian brain where
Mhm.
you lose the ability to make conscious decisions.
Yep.
And it literally does hijack you, right? And so we talk a lot about that. I'm like, you have a little lizard in your brain. Like, not literally, because I might freak some kids out, but like my boys like eat it up. And so they're like, I'm like, is your your lizard starting to come out a little bit? Like, do you want him to take control, or do you want to have a little like, do you want to bring in a little bit more of you into the situation? So we talk about it a little bit like that. And then we talk about it in so many different ways. I also reference it as a tree, because our nervous system kind of looks like the branches of a tree. Like, you've got this beautiful tree
quite literally
inside your body, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, and so when he's getting when either of them get activated, I'm like, your tree is shaking, your tree is really, really angry. Like, can we bring some breezes into the tree? Let's breathe with our tree,
Oh,
right?
I love
To
that
try to calm
visual.
it down.
That's
So
beautiful.
I do a lot of visualizations with them and
Yeah.
naming it.
Yeah.
I did do bilateral stimulation with them too, because one of my sons used to get anxious, like he's a big worrier. And you can do it really simply with your hands by just passing an object across your midline, because it actually activates both sides of your brain. And so what that does, it helps diffuse the neurological activity that's flaring and activating into an anxiety response. So you can just have an object and you just toss it back and forth, and it redirects the energy throughout the
Oh, I love
entire
that.
brain instead of focused on the one part.
I
And that
love
can help
that.
redirect as well. So those are the kind of the key ways we do it.
That's so cool. We do this, we do the 5-finger breath where they
Oh,
hold out their hand and they inhale up and they trace their finger and they hold their breath at the top, exhale down,
that's
inhale up,
good.
hold, and they do it as many times as they need. We call it the 5-finger breath. And then with my oldest son, who has a lot of processing challenges. He's very sensory seeker. He's very impulsive.
Mm-hmm.
You could say behavioral issues that really brought me to this work as well. Um, I'll like describe it as the line. I'm like, you're right at that line where
Yeah.
you're like making a choice to go back and
Uh-huh.
forth. And I'll be like, what does it feel like in your body? What is that
Mm-hmm.
impulse saying in your body? And so I try to help him understand the threshold of the impulse so that he
Yeah.
can start to feel like he's like, oh, okay. And then he had like a Lego thing like right at my face. And I was like, you're right at that line. Tell me exactly what you're feeling. And he was like, kind of brought it back a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
But beforehand, he would have just bopped me on the nose. And
Right.
so we're trying to really hard to like teach him,
Oof.
okay, you're right at that line of what's safe or not.
Yep.
So like, tell me what's going on. What do you think a safer thing would be? How can we shake
Mm-hmm.
that feeling out?
Yep.
It's starting to, like you said, name it, get that awareness going so that they
Yeah.
are not just like living from impulse to impulse.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful way of showing how you needed to be regulated in that moment
Oh my
too,
God.
to
Oh
not say,
God.
get that Lego out of my face, right?
Yes.
Like,
Which
this
I
is
wanted to,
right.
which I really wanted to, because I was like, that's going to hit me in the face. I know that for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, totally.
yeah,
Well, this
beautiful.
was such a wonderful discussion, and everybody, you should be
Mhm.
excited because she is taking this even further
Even
inside my
further.
community group next week on
Yes.
March 20th at 1:30 p.m. If you're in the community group, you get to see it live. If you're not, you can catch the recording.
Mhm.
But inside the community group, she's going to teach us actual nervous system practices as a parent, things that
Mhm.
we can do with ourselves and our kids, a practice we can put into place, which is so exciting and I think will be incredibly valuable. We kind of went broad level here. She's going to really dial it down and give us like some
Yeah,
how-tos in the
yeah,
moment.
absolutely.
I'm
I'm
so excited.
excited.
Me
Yeah.
too. Me too. And she has a free offering that she'd like to share as well.
Yeah, so I know how important it is with parents that are crazy bananas, their minds are all over the place. And when we're in the throes of some kind of nervous system response, we don't always know where to turn to for tools. So I just wanted to put together a list of really great somatic tools that we can do with our bodies to help move you through either the activated state or the more deactivated state. That way you have a list, it's there, it's ready for you, and you don't have to do any extra work. And you can just
Amazing.
pick one and play with it and see what works.
I love that. You can pick one for your kids, like read them out to your kids
Mhm.
too, see which ones resonate with them, put it on
Yeah.
your refrigerator and just be like, we're gonna pick
Yeah.
number 10 today.
Yes.
I love that. So I'll link that in the show notes so everyone can access that. So
Thank you.
Tanisha, thank you so much for joining me. This was
Yeah.
wonderful. Oh my gosh, I feel like there's so many incredible takeaways from here. So
It
thank you
was
for your
so
time.
fun. Thank you again for having me. I can't wait for the workshop.
Yay, I so appreciate it. All right, everyone, until next time, see you later. Let me see, stop recording.